The FBI raided an illegal gambling event, which you probably know. But were children actually zip-tied? This week, Heritage Action helps Idaho lawmakers enforce immigration law. Legalizing weed moves closer to the 2026 ballot. And we have an update on the design choices for Rainbow Bridge. This is the Yokel Idaho Midweek Report, where we give you an overview of the news you need to know in Idaho for the last week. Have you heard about the whistleblower lawsuit that is happening with our Attorney General, Labrador? If not, you can continue with this to the end to find out how it may end up at the Supreme Court. Also, to get full coverage on these important stories and much more, you can go to our website. And to also ensure you're the most informed Idahoan in the room, hit that subscribe button. Let's jump into the episode. On October 19th, if you will remember, federal agents executed a large operation over in Wilder. The FBI led a raid to investigate illegal gambling at a horse track, with over 200 officers from 14 agencies participating, including ICE, Border Patrol, and local police. As for the results of the raid, 5 people are facing gambling charges. Court documents reveal that the operation included pari-mutuel betting without a state license. You can look that up, but for the basic rundown of what that fancy 10-bit word means, basically peer-to-peer betting that wasn't sanctioned. Investigators are tracking over $500,000 in transactions through Zelle, Cash App, and Venmo between 2022 and 2025. One defendant resisted arrest and refused to identify herself after officers removed her from a portable restroom. As for ICE, which is the main topic of this story and controversy, they detained 105 people for immigration violations during the operation. 5 families told Associated Press that officers, air quotations, zip-tied, end quote, minors as young as 11 years old, including teenagers age 14 to 15. So not quite children, but technically children under the law. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem denied that children were restrained. However, FBI spokesperson Sandra Barker initially said no, that restraints were used on children, and then later changed her statement to say that no restraints were used on young children, end quote. The operation shows how federal agencies coordinate to address illegal activity. When gambling investigations uncover immigration violations, law enforcement must enforce all applicable laws. Canyon County Sheriff Kieran Donahue and Caldwell Police Chief Rex Ingram clarified that the FBI led the operation, not ICE, which has been a little bit muddled in the media reporting on this story. And continuing with the theme of immigration, last week, Heritage Action brought immigration policy experts to Boise to help lawmakers craft better enforcement tools for Idaho. The advocacy arm of the Heritage Foundation, which is a conservative you may or may not have heard, held a public meeting at the Idaho State Museum where former Idaho Solicitor General Theo Wold and Laura Reese, director of Heritage Foundation's Border Security and Immigration Center, discussed how states can support federal immigration law. Representative Dale Hawkins and Senator Phil Hart attended the meeting, which focused on several legislative proposals for the 2026 session. Crazy to think that's nearby. These included requiring schools to track student immigration status, documenting how many jail inmates are here illegally, and creating state penalties for those who harbor people living in the country unlawfully. Speakers praised Governor Little's partnership with ICE through the 287G program, which helps transport convicted criminals from our jails to federal detention facilities for deportation. However, they encouraged lawmakers to do more. Wold and Reese emphasized that states have authority over areas like employment verification, business licenses, and public education. They urged Idaho to use these tools to uphold immigration law and protect our towns. Several bills, for context on these topics, failed to advance last session, but are expected to return in 2026, which if you want them to advance, you probably want to reach out to your lawmaker. Hey, did you know about any of these stories? And do you like learning about Idaho? If so, make sure to subscribe or follow us so you don't miss any of our future content. And speaking about another hot button topic here in Idaho, 2 separate marijuana initiatives cleared major hurdles this last week to appear on our November 2026 ballot. The Natural Medicine Alliance of Idaho received approval to collect signatures for Idaho's Medical Cannabis Act, which would allow medical marijuana for conditions like cancer and PTSD. They need about 70,000 valid signatures by April for it to make it. Meanwhile, the legislature already placed House Joint Resolution 4 on the ballot, which would reserve any legal power to legalize marijuana or narcotics solely to lawmakers. For context, we've watched Oregon and Washington as they've experimented and struggled with the legalization of marijuana. Studies have shown that collision claims jumped 3% after recreational marijuana became legal in those states. Unlike tobacco, which has its own side effects that keeps people alert generally and just causes them to be a little bit more energetic, marijuana makes people a little bit more sluggish and impairs their ability to drive and work. Not really good for a productive populace. If you oppose these initiatives or want to learn more, you can contact your legislature to express your thoughts about the marijuana legislation or legalization. You also want to stay informed about both of the measures that will be coming in 2026. The legislature has shown its opposition to marijuana by passing a $300 mandatory minimum fine for possession earlier this year. Let them know your stance before it reaches the ballot. And staying with the topic of drugs, on Reformation Day, detectives from the Kootenai County Sheriff's Office raided a home in Rathdrum and discovered an active crack cocaine lab. Inside, they found powder cocaine, methamphetamines, and illegally processed hydrocodone, and over 200 pounds of, we'll just say, illicit mushrooms. They arrested James Pond, a 61-year-old Rathdrum resident, who faces charges for manufacturing crack cocaine and possessing drugs with intent to deliver. Investigators also seized multiple firearms, ammunition, drug distribution materials, and cash from the property. Now, if this wasn't bad enough, there is a little bit more of a troubling element, which is that detectives found behind the main house a family with 3 children living in a shed. The Rathdrum Police Department, in a separate statement, is opening a child abuse investigation, and 3 minors were placed into custody of the Idaho Department of Health and Welfare. This bust comes after an ongoing investigation into suspected drug trafficking in the area. Pond is being held without bail at the Kootenai County Jail while the investigation continues. If you like the sound of the rule of law being upheld, or have been well informed about the stories that we've talked about so far, do us a favor and hit the like and subscribe button. Helps us stay connected with you and reach more folks who love Idaho just like yourself. And speaking about the court system, and one that I talked about earlier, the whistleblower case against Attorney General Rao Labrador's office won't die quite yet. Former Deputy Attorney General Daphne Hong appealed to the state Supreme Court on October 23rd, after a judge dismissed her lawsuit in September, something that we previously reported on. Huang, for context, worked at the AG's office representing the Department of Health and Welfare until Labrador fired her in March of 2023, just after she raised ethical concerns about new management. She claims the office retaliated against her for doing her job. The case centers on how Labrador investigated Health and Welfare's handling of $72 million in child care grants. Grants that Huang had previously said were legally sound. Judge Jonathan Menda ruled in September that, quote, no rational juror, end quote, could find Huang that she proved her claims. But Huang's attorneys argue that the judge erred when he said that there was no genuine dispute over material facts under our state's whistleblower laws. Labrador didn't investigate Huang's concerns before firing her, later saying in a deposition that she was, quote, not acting in good faith, end quote. The AG's office maintains that Huang was fired for misconduct and has declined to comment on the appeal. And speaking of another thing that is probably going to end up in the court systems, and we have reported on previously, solar advocates and the city of Boise filed appeals last month asking state regulators to reconsider how Idaho Power pays homeowners who generate solar power. This marks the latest chapter in a fight we've covered before, while Idaho's Power successfully slashed payments to over 14,000 solar consumers by 31%. Vote Solar, and kind of getting into the roots, and Sierra Club wanted the Idaho Public Utilities Commission to create a working group that reviews the fairness of these rates before 2028, when regulators plan their next scheduled review. These groups argue that the current system changes too much from year to year and favors Idaho Power's profits over families who invested thousands in solar panels. The Commission, for some context in our past reporting, already has cut rates less than Idaho Power requested, rejecting the utility's past push for a 60% decrease, so they only did about half of what they wanted. But advocates say that the method that officials use to calculate these payments remains flawed. State regulators must decide on these appeals by November 18th. Families who installed solar panels after 2019 now earn between 15.5 cents per kilowatt hour during peak summer hours and less than 3 cents during off-peak times. Did you know about the fight happening over solar, or the wilder case with illegal immigrants? If not, do us a favor and share this episode. It helps us keep others informed about what's going on in the state, just as you are now. And speaking of feedback and something that affects all of us and we love to complain about related to traffic, the Idaho Transportation Department wants to hear from you about the future of rail in our state. Through November 12th, ITD is collecting public feedback on how we can strengthen both freight and passenger rail systems across Idaho. This matters because our rail networks move about 130 million tons of freight annually, most of it farm products, and accounts for $7.8 billion of our state's economy. Right now, we have just one passenger rail station up in Sandpoint, for those that, not the ag side, that serves over 6,500 people each year. But our population and traffic woes have increased, as you know, especially here in the Treasure Valley corridor. And rail could help solve these challenges. The 5-minute survey asks questions about current conditions, future trends, and what opportunities exist to improve rail infrastructure that supports our economy. ITD will use your feedback to guide discussions with railroads and federal partners, with a final plan coming next spring. This is your chance to speak up about how rail can serve Idahoans better. And coming to our last story, and a fun one, plus one that we've been talking about for a little bit, the Idaho Transportation Department narrowed the designs for the Rainbow Bridge replacement to 3 final options. Each designs feature concrete or steel arches similar to the iconic Rainbow Arch that gave the 1933 bridge its name. ITD District 3 engineer Jason Brickman announced the selection on Thursday based on more than 800 public comments gathered online and during summer workshops. The 3 finalists were chosen from the original proposals. Once a bridge type is selected, ITD plans to focus on aesthetic features like railing types and pier shapes. But the historic bridge's fate remains uncertain. ITD continues to recommend removing the Rainbow Bridge once the new construction is built, citing safety concerns and lack of space for parking. The agency estimates that keeping the old bridge could cost between $20 million and $50 million in repairs alone. As we previously reported on, ITD faced public pushback this summer after quietly announcing the demolition plans. More comment opportunities are expected next year before a final design is chosen. Construction on the $60 million replacement bridge, which, wait a second, $60 million, that sounds like the repair costs, I don't know, side note, are scheduled to begin in 2028. And speaking of schedule, I have one and I need to stay on it, and I hope you can as well. That said, thank you for listening to the entire report. I sincerely hope you found it enjoyable and valuable. If you like the midweek report, make sure to check out our other content on our website. Also, if we missed any important points or provided incorrect information, please feel free to reach out to us via email or on Twitter by tweeting us at @LocalYokelIdaho. With the small team we have, we're not able to cover everything, but we do our best to cover the most interesting and important stories. Thank you for your continued support and assistance. That's all for now. I wish you a fantastic rest of your week. Godspeed.